Hey everyone, this is a build guide for the Scamp. I offer the Scamp as a finished build, as a build it yourself kit, or you can buy just the hardware kit and print the parts yourself depending on what your preference is. This right here on my right is the hardware kit. It'll come with a lubricant as well in a smaller container. And the tools that I'm going to be using to build this, which I think are the most useful, I have 2 pairs of pliers, a box cutter or a knife. Use either one of these just to clean up some of the parts. A small jeweler's file I found has been super helpful. And depending on your hardware kit, trying to move away from multiple different sizes, but a 2.5, a 2, and a 1.5 millimeter hex. So you can use Allen keys or bits like I'm going to be using with a drill, and a drill as well as I believe this is 5/16 wrench for tightening the nuts at the end of the build. The drill is, I think, fairly important, but you can do it by hand or using the pliers when you're screwing the rods into place. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take your grip. We're going to take your grip, and you have 3 locking hex nuts, and the first 2 are going to slide into the grip, with the walls being parallel to the walls of the grip. And I found that if you can't get it in, taking your pliers like so and just kind of lining them up, you can kind of push it into place like that, and then it'll just pop all the way down. You're going to do the same thing away on the other side. It's fighting you. Just take your pliers and push them into place like that. And then, as I was saying, you can do this by hand, where you just push this in and start twisting. And you might encounter some friction, so you can grab your pliers and twist it like this. I like to use a drill just because it speeds up the process, but if you don't have a drill, then pliers work just fine. But for the sake of the video, we're just going to go do it like this. And you want to do a few rotations past where you start feeling friction, and that we can adjust it later, but that's basically about as far as you want to go in. You can see we're going to try to get these threaded rods pretty even with each other. There you go, they're looking pretty flush. And then we're going to take these 2, or not the 2, we're going to take 2 of these support rods. There's a 2 centimeter one, there's 6 of the 2 centimeter size, and 2 of the 3 centimeter size, right here and here. We're going to take 2 of the 2 centimeter lengths and fit them into these support holes. A pair of pliers helps get the extra force behind them, because you don't want to push directly on it. You'll poke through your finger pretty easily. And just like that, your grip is in place. If it's not quite going down, you can I take the flat end of the pliers and just carefully push on it like that. And now your grip, for the most part, has everything put together. The back of the grip uses a separate piece for the mag catch. This is so that it is not fixed into the grip, so if it wears down, you can replace it easily. Also, it has a small amount of flex, which allows for the mag to slide in and out more easily, while still maintaining a super solid grip once the mag is in. So we're going to take our 2 M2 by 6 millimeter screws. They are the really tiny ones that are going to come in your kit. And we're going to use our 1.5 millimeter bit. And first thing we have to do is slide the catch into the grip. So with it in its proper orientation, you're just going to slide it out, or slide it in rather, and make sure it stays lined up. And the bottom side is going to catch first, as it's going to feel intuitive to push it straight in like this, but go past the lip and then bring the bottom in first. Kind of hold it with your thumb, and then push the top forward with your finger like that. And that will create a nice spot. And if you have your mag, this will help with your build. Just load it into place so that everything lines up, and when you put pressure on it when you're drilling it in, it doesn't pop out. Otherwise, leaving your finger in there is the other best way to do it. But for us, I'm going to leave the mag in so we don't have any problems. I'm going to fit the screw to the end of my driver and just gently pop it in. You don't want to put too much pressure on this piece because it is printed in line with where the screws are going to be pressing on it, and it could crack it. So just like that, just get them fixed. And it might take a few pushes to get it adjusted, just like that. Perfect. Alright, so now the grip is just about finished. So we're going to put that off to the side, and we're going to put together our floating plunger system, which is made up of this catch, our plunger head, and this floating plunger housing, the floating plunger mouth, the floating plunger cap, and the floating plunger catch. And we are going to be using 4 of these M3x12s, 1 M3x20, 1 of these little hexes, the smallest one that's not locking, and for the front half of it, we're going to be using just 1 of the really small 4mm O-rings, as well as this threaded rod, which is smooth down the center and threaded at the ends. The whole floating plunger is built around this piece, so really be careful that when you're gripping it with pliers, you're only grabbing near the ends so as to maintain the smoothness up and down the rod. So let's take the floating plunger head, or the plunger head, and you're going to thread it through. Going in, you're going to see one spot has a little divot. That's for the O-ring, and you're going to thread it through. You don't want to drill it out. You don't want to force it through. You want it to be nice and basically as close to smooth as possible. So just take your time and thread it through, and that'll give you a better seal, and it should move pretty easily. If it is binding up, just run it back and forth a few times to loosen it up, but don't add any extra tools. Just get it to fit smoothly on your main priming rod. Next, take some of your lubricant that you're going to have, just barely any on your finger, and just scrape it off on the rod. Rotate the rod 180 degrees and scrape it off. You just want to get a little bit on both sides so that the O-ring has something that it can be lubricated with when you slide it on. So you're going to take your 4mm O-ring, slide it down, and into that pre-existing groove on the inside. So you have a little bowl, and there's a groove for the catch and a groove for the O-ring. Now the catch is going to slide right on top. If it is catching like this, it's binding, that means it's probably a little bit too tight. You can take your file and try to open up that end. Or if you have a drill bit that is slightly wider, you can just try to take out some of the excess plastic, because there might be some that catches on the inside. And just like that, it should smoothly slide. And then when you press it all together, you'll find that it should all hold on to itself. And you'll slide it back and forth until the lubricant kind of coats the whole bar. You'll feel it move pretty smoothly. Now let's take our 3mm non-locking hex. This is going to fit right in here. We can take that screwdriver or the flathead or Phillips, doesn't matter. Just drop it into place. You want to make sure it's flat. And now we are going to take our 2.5mm bit, put it in our drill. And again, I'm trying to get these all down to 2mm bits, but at the moment, I'm working with the hardware that I have. So slide it all the way to the end so the drill is not interfering at all. And then just fit it through. And you're going to want to drill it all the way in gently so as not to crack the plastic on the plunger head. And whoops, you're going to want to make sure that it at least catches into the nut on the inside. So it'll feel a little bit of torque, and it'll all pretty much bite down super tight on itself. You're going to have the screw holding on to the catch in addition to the nut, and that is going to provide a lot of extra support because this piece is basically what holds everything together when the spring is compressed. So you really want to make sure that that nut is in place and that it is holding firm. And that is the plunger for the Scamp. The next part we're going to put together is the catch system. The cap is going to go on near the end, so we're just going to put it to the side, and we can assemble basically the front half of the catch, which is going to take 2 of the 4 M3x12s, the 3 printed parts, and a spring, which I forgot to put out. And our spring, which is going to fit into the housing and what is going to create the pressure that holds the catch system down. So that spring will fit right into the little hole at the top of your catch, and then just slide it into the housing. Use that screwdriver, get that spring nice and lined up. Make sure it compresses. It should have a pretty smooth movement. There shouldn't be any binding on the sides, depending on your print settings, or I mean not much. I've really tried to make this, earlier versions of this bound a lot, so I've really tried to work on making it not bind. The print orientation and everything that I do should keep it relatively smooth. Take your plunger mouth. We're going to switch back to our 2mm bit and our M3x12s. We're going to line everything up. You want to make sure that you're not over tightening anything. And that everything's going into place properly. This might be an old piece. 1 second. Alright, so you're going to make sure that you're not using an old prototype head that somehow fell into your build box. You won't be getting one. I don't check those files anymore. But, threw me off for a second. You're going to be using the proper mouth. You're going to fit it over the catch house. So, and the square in the center of the mouth is offset. I don't know how well you can see that. And that is going to be facing in the direction that the spring is pushing down. So the latch wants to move that way, so you want to put the offset square in the same direction. So. Again, if you're using a drill, you want to get this parts to the equivalent of hand tight and make sure that it is nice and smooth in there. Alright, so now we can put that to the side for a moment as well, and we can start on putting together the turnaround. So we can just start putting parts in. The barrel is going to slide in. I like to test it first by taking it from the front, sliding it, and making sure that it creates a nice snug fit. If your parts are a little bit loose, you can always take some Teflon tape and that'll help the seal on the inside. It needs maybe 1 layer because it all gets compressed in really tight. If they're too tight, this is where the nail file comes in, or the jeweler's file, or whatever you choose, and just boring out maybe a couple strokes in and out will open it up and you'll get that nice tight seal. For this one, we're just going to take it. Now that we know it fits, we're going from the back and we're going to try to remove as little material as possible as we slide it through. And then as it gets in, you're going to feel the flare on the barrel start to catch. So you kind of want to get there. Give it a grip, and you're going to grip it and twist it as you pull through. Like so. If you can get it moving like that. That one's particularly tight. I try not to make them that tight, but the tighter, the better seal you'll probably have. So now that you know it's nice and firmly in place and it's not going anywhere, you want to make sure that it is past the turnaround. And mine is. See if I can see it in there. I can bring the light over. So you can see the turnaround is right in here. Ooh, this is hard to orient. And your barrel is past it. That's all you're really looking for. You don't want any turbulence inside there. So you want it to be nice and clean. That is our turnaround, and we are going to just have that waiting. The next thing we're going to do is put together our slide. So we can put this off to the side here. We're just going to work on the next piece. We are going to take these 2 little O-rings. We're going to fit them over the first 2 notches. so, and then slide this in, and you want to make sure that the front of this lines up with the two lips that are inside of the slide grip. Now you're going to take two of your M3x12s, and through the top of the slide there are holes that will allow them to fit through, and you're going to fix the pusher to the slide. And again, not more than hand tight. You want them to be torqued, but you don't want to strip the plastic. And then if you're worried about the fit or of your aluminum bar sliding through, you can always check to make sure that it goes smoothly. If you're getting any binding, like this one moves pretty smooth. If you're getting any binding, either it means your fit is off and just adjust your pusher, or you can take your file, and if it's just a little bit, you might just have a burr somewhere on the inside of your plastic, and this will just really quickly clean out anything that you have possibly trapped in there. And then this angle aluminum should slide through super smoothly. And then again with the rails right here on the side, make sure that this slides through. It does. These have a lot better smoothness, but if you are getting binding, either this is not cleaned off in the front from where the supports were, you can take it off, or you had some print imperfection on the inside of this rail, and it just takes either a screwdriver to snap it off or your file. That is our slide. So now we can take our turnaround and fit it to our grip, like so, and then it's going to slide along these two main threaded rails, and it's going to fit into these support bars and above these two lips. So the reason I did these three parts is because this basically connects to the rest of the blaster, and I wanted to make sure that you have enough stability, and I didn't think the support rods alone would be enough in addition to the threaded bar. So I added these two lips, which create 6 points of contact. So just kind of make sure you get over them, and it should lock into place like that. And you'll feel once it's in, well, you'll see that the gap is just about gone, and it's not going to move. It's going to be super sturdy. Before we move on, let's really quickly just drop the first half of the trigger on by taking our next two M3x12s. Let's do one through the first hole. And once you get in, you can just kind of overturn it so that it spins freely. And that should allow you to pretty easily screw it into the trigger. Line up the first holes so that the front of the trigger is facing the long side of the rod bar. And just like everything else, hand tight, doesn't need to be more than that. You really don't want to damage these parts. And I just wanted to get this out of the way because when we start sliding stuff together, it's nice to have this put together before we get there. Now we can slide our spacer, or barrel spacer. It's going to slide right over the barrel. If your barrel is loose, make sure that you don't push it backwards in. If you do need to put like a screwdriver or something in there to hold it, or anything, you just want to make sure it doesn't slide back. I haven't had any like really seriously get stuck, but it has been loose, and it's a worry I've thought about. We're gonna take our plunger tube, a little bit of lubricant, just kind of get the whole thing nice and coated. If you can't reach to the center, no worries. You just want to get it nice and clean. I'm gonna go look for a rag. Take the lubricant off your finger, and I forgot to do this earlier, but take the O-ring that comes in your kit, put it over your plunger. I've heard that the O-rings I use are kind of tight compared to what everyone else uses, or what some other people use. I'm not exactly sure. Haven't used anyone else's blasters, but if you do struggle with it, a pair of pliers acting in opposition helps. There, just make sure it fits nice and smoothly. So you're getting some binding on this side, which means there's probably a burr on the inside of this tube, which is where that knife comes in handy. Just really gently the inside out, and I'm going to re-lubricate this side so we get all the little bits of imperfections out that we just scraped off. Like so. And then if you have a higher or a lower viscosity lubricant, you can throw that in there to help with friction. There we go. Alright. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the plunger tube with the plunger in it, the catch facing away from the grip. You're going to slide it, ooh, don't drop it, you're going to slide it into the turnaround. And then you're going to take the, I guess it's the plunger rod, and you're going to feed it through the open hole in the back of the turnaround. And you're going to give it some twists. And just like the plunger head, you're going to thread it through, not force through, so that you have a nice, smooth slide. Okay, but like before, we're going to take some lubricant, scrape it off on the rod, and start fitting our last 3 4mm O-rings over it. I just do an O-ring, some lubricant, and then another O-ring, a little more lubricant, and then our last O-ring. And that just really makes sure that all the air is sealed nicely inside there, and you know, who cares, put a little more lubricant on. Now you're going to take your turnaround nub, which is the smaller one of the 2 little parts that you're going to have, and you're going to fit the, oh, we're going to make sure that the supports are taken off. And you're going to fit the pusher rod into it. And because of the lip on the bottom of it, it's not going to want to go in. So just gently take your plunger rod and just push it up. It only needs about 1 millimeter of movement, like that, and then it'll fit into place. And you're going to take one of your M3x8 screws, so the smaller one, or shorter one rather, and you're going to screw it into place. Again, hand tight, just like everything else with the screws on this blaster. Hand tight is more than enough. Oh, see, this is why I wanted to make the trigger together, so we don't forget. The trigger has to go on before this spacer. So just slide the trigger in, and then slide the spacer down, because the trigger will bind up on it. Like so. Alright, now we can start putting together the back of the blaster. So a little bit of lubricant on your finger, and you're just going to coat the pusher, just so that it slides easier in and out of the turnaround. Like that. And if you want, you can slide this out just like that and put a little bit on the turnaround itself. Push everything through. You're going to be able to push everything just about as far in as you want. And then slide this. There's a hole. My bad. We're going to put these on first. These are your support rods for the slide. The holes are off center. You want to make sure that they are off in the upwards direction. You're going to slide them into the turnaround, and you're going to have them off kilter. And once they are in and you can see the holes are roughly lined up, you're going to keep applying force forward and lock them into place. If you push down too far, or if they overshoot the holes, you want them to be a little more up in the front. So just use your pliers and lock them into place like that. Do the same thing on the other side. And just kind of use your pliers and make sure that the holes are aligned with the holes in the turnaround. You have 4 of these grub screws. You're going to take one and use it to lock in this side. You're going to fit it through the printed hole on the turnaround and into the cut hole of the aluminum guide rod. When you feel it bind, you might be able to go just a little bit more. And then I like to back it out just so that you're not risking stripping the threads or stripping the hex, and then you can push it back in. You just need to go flush to the plastic. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And just like that, your support rods for your guide are in place. Now we can take our guide, slide the plunger rod through, and make sure that they slide. The grooves of the slide are smooth along the rails of the slide, and it'll fit together nice and smooth like this. Now you're going to push this all the way through. You're going to take one of your small locking hexes. You have 2 of them. You're going to thread it onto the back. This is one of the main places that I think having 2 pliers comes into handy, because you can grip it right near the threads. You don't want to grip too far down, but right near the threads. And then if you have really strong fingers, you can just twist it on, or you can take your pliers, just do it like that. But I like to just do it by hand because it's faster for me. If you have a wrench that is this size, then that is what I would absolutely do, but I personally don't have one, so I just pinch really hard and twist away. And then once it gets near the end and it gets really tough, then I use my pliers to finish it off. Now you're going to take your pusher cap, slide it over the back end like this. You can pull your plunger out so you can see it nice and easy. And so I'm getting a little bit of binding. I'm not sure where it's coming from. So I'm going to do a quick check over all my parts before I try to keep forcing through this. I'm just going to take a little bit off of this corner. A little bit off right here. So I'm assuming it's from the edges. Let's see if that fixed it. Yeah, see, that fixed it. So now it's a lot smoother. So I had a little, there must have been a burr somewhere on the aluminum, but easy fix. Now slide this into place. And you're going to take 2 more M3x12s. I need an extender on this piece because currently it's just a little bit too short to reach all the way in. And I'm just using a quick change bit on my drill. And there goes my screw. And you really want to be really careful with this cap at the end. It's very tiny and pretty prone to breaking if you over tighten it, but by hand tight or just less than hand tight, you won't have any issues. If you do hear any type of crunching, it's probably just supports breaking away, but it's probably a good idea to stop as long as it looks mostly flush. There's not a lot of force on it, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. Now I can slide it all together. We're going to take this piece of angle aluminum now. We're going to slide it in. We're going to see if it fits into our turnaround. And this is probably the tightest fit on the entire blaster. So I'm going to actually take off some of these edges, put a small chamfer on it so that has no chance of catching it on its way in. And as I'm filming this video, I'm actually learning a lot myself. So for my hardware kits, this will be done ahead of time. But regardless, I still think it'll be a tough fit. Actually, it's going quite smoothly. If it's lined up and you just have this little extra fit, you can line it up with your pliers. Just give it a little bit of push like that so it lines up flush with the back of the blaster. Oops, I over pulled it out. But I'm actually going to take this off. I'm going to clean both ends of this. Just like that, nice and smooth. Cool. So now we have basically the back half of the blaster put together. Slide our trigger back into place, and we're moving forward. We're going to take 2 more of the 2cm support rods. We're going to fit them into the front of the turnaround now. And for some reason, every time I built this blaster, I don't know why, I always forget to do the top rod. We're going to take our last locking nut. We're going to open the slide. We're going to fit the locking nut into the front, or the back of the turnaround rather. There's a cavity that's hex shaped and it'll fit right in. Close the slide. Take your drill or pliers or whatever your preferred method of screwing is. And I'm going to take my drill, I'm going to tighten it over the front of this threaded rod. And you're just going to tighten it so that it just barely kisses past. You don't want it to be pushing past the lip of the plastic. Otherwise, it'll interfere with your slide closing. There we go. And then we're going to kind of line up the other two threaded rods at this same distance out of the blaster. It doesn't have to be perfect right now, we just want to get it close. Because we'll probably end up adjusting it later on. Anyways, we're going to take our top spacer, make sure that any burrs that are on it are cleaned out so that it slides smoothly. We're going to make sure that our spacer under fits. And you can put this in whatever color you want. It just adds a little bit of color that'll shine through. You don't have to put it in at all. It's just a purely cosmetic piece. And this will slide. The threaded rod will slide through it, and all the parts will line up. And it'll fit right over the top and right onto those support rods. We have all this trigger, all this stuff is already in place. Now we can take our plunger tube front and fit it over everything. The plunger tube front has 4 support rod holes, here and here on one side, and only 2 on the upper half on the other side. The side with no support rod holes is going to be facing the grip, so that the only support rod holes are facing forwards. Line up everything and slide it over the plunger tube. Now we're going to take our long 3cm rods, we're going to slide them in, push them down. And you can do this before or after. I think it's just easier. It lines up super tightly, so it's just nice to have it all put together ahead of time like that. Now the next thing we're going to do is probably the most, I'd say, difficult part of the build, just in terms of coordination. You're going to take your K25. It has a chopped side and a flat side. The chopped side is going to go into the blaster, around your support rod, and it'll fit into the plunger tube. Then we're going to take our catch assembly that I did not clean off. In case you guys can't tell, these are pretty impromptu. I'm building them just the way I would as I send them out. Basically the goal is to show kind of that even a non-polished version, right? This is not something I sat down and I squeaked every ounce out of it. This is, you're just sitting down, you're casual, you want to watch TV, you can, I guess if you're listening to it, you might have a hard time watching TV, but you can just sit down really casually, enjoy this. You don't need to be ultra precise. It doesn't need to be super specific. You don't have to, you don't have to just have everything exactly perfect to get a solid performing blaster. So that's how I do it. I just throw it together. And then with tuning, you can get the numbers significantly higher than just a straight build, but they already start off super hot. So the spring is in, your catch is assembled, you're going to take it, and you're going to push down, and you're going to try to line up the hole right here with your plunger rod. Careful not to stab yourself, but that's going to push through and you're going to get some pre-compression in the spring. So you're going to push down on this. Now you're going to take your pliers and you're going to grip just before the threads and you're going to hold on tight. Okay, so this is the part that requires some grip. So you're going to grab it nice and tight. And you're going to start putting on your last small locking hex. So I'm doing it by hand. Again, if you have a wrench or a ratchet that fits this, then I would absolutely use that. Pliers will take a little bit longer, but they work just as well. Just get the coordination down and make sure that you don't hit your brass barrel, because that would be a bummer to dent. Although from the dented barrels, I mean, at most I've only lost like, I think like 10 FPS. So it's a bummer, but you're still going to be shooting hotter than every other pistol on the field. Alright, last little piece in place, push down on it, take your wrench out, and now your catch is ready. Now we're going to take our cap and slide it over the little rod and line it up with the hex that happened to line up super nicely. But there's a hex in the cap to line up in here to lock everything into place. And again, our 2mm or 2.5 depending on your hardware kit. You're going to screw that M12 in. Just hand tight. You don't want to strip this one. You don't want to strip any of them, but you know. Like that. So now the whole system is locked in. Now you have your trigger release. Just slide over the barrel. You want to get this in before you put on the scamp front end. So that'll slide in. Now you're going to take your front end. Oh, you have 2 more support rods, which are going to fit into those bottom support holes. Now you're going to line up your scamp front end with everything. Really careful. It should line up pretty smoothly like that, and it'll lock into place. And so you can see here that I over-tightened. I'm going to prime this really quick. I over-tightened this screw, or this rod. So we're going to back it out just a little bit. We're actually going to back out all of our threaded rods because I went over on all of it. And make sure you're putting enough grip on it to actually twist it, not just spin around. Slide everything back into place. Still didn't go far enough. Basically, you want to get them to line up with the barrel. And I don't think this guy's going to make it because he was an experimental piece that I thought I could use, but I couldn't. So we're going to take them out. Like that. And he's going to get used for something else. For now, we are going to use this to clean up a new one. We're getting a real in-depth look at how everything's run around here. So we're going to put this guy in the front. Okay, just like before, you're going to thread it all the way through. I lost my screw. Okay, just like before, you don't want to over thread it. Line it up with the edge of the plastic. That one is a way better length. Make sure you don't drop your supports. Slide your trigger release back on. Wiggle it a little bit, lighten it all back up. And you should see everything sticking out the front. There we go, it all lines up nicely into place. Now we're going to take our non-locking hexes. We have 3 of the larger sizes. And we are just going to fit these onto the front like so. Again, not too tight, just make sure they're on. And you should feel a little bit of resistance with the wrench, but you don't want to be putting a lot of torque on the plastic, otherwise you'll get everything misaligned. But you don't want there to be any flex. You'll hear nothing. Right now you can just hear the bar sliding around because it's in there, but that's good. And the last thing we're going to do for the assembly basic part of it, before we start testing it, is you have this little trigger spring. You're going to slide it, whatever way is easiest, over the little nub in the front. If it doesn't want to quite fit over, a small flathead screwdriver to push it down. Take your last, I guess not your last, it's going to be your first, or second actually, M3 by 8 I like to fix it to the front, catch a little bit of a ring of the spring, and thread this all the way forward into, you're going to use the farther back hole. So there's 2 holes on the trigger to adjust tension. I found that the front one really doesn't give you quite the pull back that you want, so I just use the front or the back one. And then you can just test it really quick. And the first couple of pulls you might have a little bit of wearing down as the 2 plastic parts kind of wear each other down. They are unfortunately printed layer to layer, so the first couple trigger pulls and releases you might get a few jams. If it does jam up, just take a screwdriver to release it and just push in right through here. And I mean, in my experience, it's only been, see how that one's firing super smoothly. It took me maybe 10 shots to get these super smooth. The last part of this, the second to last part of this, is now that you have it all sliding smoothly, your angle aluminum in the back is going to be fixed with your last 2 grub screws. You don't want to over tighten these. I had a big issue with one, and the prime was a nightmare, and I could not figure it out. You would prime it, and the second you got it free, it would go, but it was just the hardest prime, and I was trying to get it out to whoever ordered it, and I just didn't feel comfortable sending it. I couldn't figure it out, and it turns out I had tightened the grub screws too much, and they were torquing the angle aluminum at the top and creating a super tight prime. So you want to make sure that they're just fixed in enough to help lock it into place, but so that the prime is not affected by it. Now we're going to line up your hexes. You want the tips or the angles, the vertices, to all be basically pointed straight up. You're going to take your cap, pop it over, and start fitting in your last M3/8. Into place, hand tight. I dropped one, so I'm going to go ahead and grab it. And just like that, that is the Scamp Build. Super clean, super sturdy. Super nice.